Hi, I'm Brad Strickland, and I'm here to read two short sections from the first chapter of WINDMASTER'S BANE, a wonderful fantasy novel by my good friend Tom Deitz. It's available now from www.untreedreads.com. It's about David Sullivan, who's a boy in the North Georgia mountains who, through a strange set of circumstances, acquires the ability to see things that no one else can see. Chapter 1. A funeral scene, Friday, July 31st. Death was fast approaching, death in the form of old age, and it was approaching them both. Yet Patrick, the priest, was not concerned, not while there still remained any chance of salvation for the soul of the man sitting on the stony ground beside him. Oisin was stubborn. His arguments were cunning, but he was a pagan, and he had once been a warrior, a follower of Finn MacCool, in fact, who had been the greatest champion in Ireland. Just now Oisin was defending Finn's prowess on the field of battle. The words of his boasting were a study in Gaelic eloquence, so much eloquence, in fact, that they fairly leapt from the page of the worn blue volume David Sullivan held open in his lap. He could see them clearly, the two old men, one thin and frail, robed and hooded like a monk, the other yet well-muscled, mail and helm and sword shining bright in the morning. It was a wonderful image. "Davy!" The image shattered. Footsteps pounded up the rickety barn stairs behind him. Curse be younger brothers, he thought, won't even leave you alone for 30 minutes. David frowned at the book in grim determination. Oisin sang now of the virtues of Finn, no longer simply as a warlord, but as a man accomplished in every art. It was getting good. The pagan was winning. "Pa got the tractor stuck just like Ma said he would," little Billy cried gleefully as he galloped past to stand perilously close to the open door of the hayloft. David snorted irritably. He rearranged himself in the dusty old rocking chair, adjusted his wire-frame glasses, scratched his chin where a trace of stubble had finally begun to grow, and returned to his reading. "That sure is a big black station wagon," said little Billy, peering out the door and down the hill. David ignored him. "Sure are a lot of cars behind it. All of them have the lights on. It ain't even dark yet." David shook a stray lock of unruly blonde hair out of his eyes and glanced up reluctantly, a little surprised to see patchy blue sky and scattered shafts of July sunlight, where only a short while before clouds had held uncontested sovereignty above the familiar river bottoms and high rolling ridges of the North Georgia farm he called home. Wisps of cloud still hung wraith-like here and there among the dark green hollows across the valley. Just like Ireland must be, he thought, until he lowered his gaze toward the muddy gravel road at the foot of the hill, where a line of cars crept reverently along behind a hulking black vehicle. "It's a funeral procession," he said matter-of-factly. "Just a couple more lines." "A funeral procession?" "A funeral procession," David growled. "You ought to know that, old as you are, and if you ask me any more questions, you'll soon have first-hand knowledge of one from inside the hearse." His last words hung ominously in the air. "What's a hearse?" "That big black station wagon, except it's not exactly a station wagon, bigger for one thing, built on a stretched Cadillac frame. They're only used for funerals. Now please be quiet. I've only got 3 pages to go, okay?" Little Billy was quiet for about 3 lines. "They're going in that old graveyard across the road. They're going to bury somebody?" David slammed the book abruptly shut, a sound like a tiny thunderclap. Little Billy jumped, uttered a small yip of surprise, and dropped the handful of straw he'd been fidgeting with into the muddy backyard below. He looked up at his older brother, and their eyes met, and he knew he was in trouble. David erupted from the rocker, setting it into riotous motion on the rough old boards. Little Billy was quicker, though, and darted down the narrow aisle between the hay bales. "I'm going to get you, Squirt!" David cried loudly. He ran after his brother until he saw Billy's head disappear down the stairs that led to the ground floor of the barn, then stopped suddenly and tiptoed quickly back to jog noisily in place by the hayloft door. His mother's Friday wash flapped optimistically on the line below. and directly underneath, little Billy ran as if the devil himself were chasing him, down the stairs and into darkness, and then across the red clay floor, deftly leaping piles of cow manure and bales of hay as he went. Abruptly, he bounded out into the broken sunlight of late afternoon and paused, his mouth slightly open in confusion. He glanced fearfully back into the gloom. "Hoo-wee!" cried David as he leapt from the hayloft in a sweeping arc that landed him directly behind his little brother. He made one frantic grab for the boy, but miscalculated and stumbled forward on his knees and into the mud. Little Billy shrieked, but his feet were already carrying him through the laundry and down the hill beside the house. David recovered quickly and dodged left, skirting between his daddy's four-wheel drive Ford pickup truck and his own red Mustang, hoping to ambush little Billy as he came round the other side. But little Billy saw him at the last instant, squealed joyously, and threw his luck into one last wild, reckless dash toward the road where the slow train of cars continued to pass obliviously. David caught him halfway there, grasped him by the belt of his grubby jeans, and jerked him quickly up into the air. He locked his elbows and held the little boy above his head, kicking frantically in 5-year-old indignation. "Now that I got you, what should I do with you, I wonder?" David glanced meaningfully at the procession and then back at his brother. "Maybe I'll take you down the hill, give you the undertaker, tell him put you on ice. Would you like that, little Billy?" Little Billy shook his head vigorously. "No, Davy." "Maybe I'll take you up to the house then, hang you from the rooftop first. Would you like that better?" "You better quit it. I'm going to call Pa." "Pa's not here," David said fiendishly, as he lowered his brother to his shoulders and began to stride purposefully up the hill. Little Billy tried to crawl headfirst down the front of David's body, but his attempt at escape only resulted in David grabbing him by the ankles and holding him with his head bobbing up and down between David's knees. It was not an efficient mode of travel, David realized before he had gone 3 steps up the hill. He stopped and began to swing his brother pendulum-like between his legs, lowering him slowly until the white blonde hair brushed the long grass of the yard. Little Billy alternately screamed and giggled, but David could feel his grip slipping. He made one last final sweep and released his brother at the bottom of the arc to send the little boy scooting downhill between his wide-braced legs. On the follow-through, David abruptly found himself peering between his knees at the bright-eyed face of a very smug little Billy, lying in the slick grass further down the hill. He suddenly felt very foolish. Little Billy laughed. "You sure do look funny with your butt up in the air and your face down by your feet. You'll look funnier when I get through with you, you little—" David started to straighten up but paused, blinking as something attracted his attention. The air around his head suddenly seemed to vibrate, as if invisible mosquitoes swarmed there, and the hair on the back of his neck began to prickle inexplicably. He froze, still bent over. Beyond little Billy, he saw the funeral procession halt as the hearse turned into the seldom-used cemetery of the Sullivan Cove Church of God across the way. It was strange, David thought suddenly, to see a whole funeral procession at one time from between one's legs. The air pulsed again. David felt his eyes fill up with darkness, as sometimes happened when he stood up too quickly from a hot bath. His head swam. He felt dizzy. He blinked once more, but the darkness lingered. "Oh my God," he thought for a panicked instant, "I've been struck blind." But that was ridiculous. His whole body was tingling now. He could feel the hair on his arms and legs stiffening as chill after chill raced over him. And then the darkness was burned away by a hot light, as if he stared straight into the sun with his naked eyes, but with no pain. Another blink, and the world returned abruptly to normal, leaving only a faint itchy tingle in David's eyes. He shrugged, executed a lopsided somersault, and got up to chase little Billy. "I get you yet, Squirt," David shouted, bounding up the porch steps. "I just washed them pants," his mother groaned as he passed. A little later, out in the woods on a camping trip with a friend of his, David discovers that maybe that change in his vision isn't just something that happens once. Maybe it's permanent. David was gazing across space at the next high mountain over, a mountain whose nether slopes were entirely ringed by lake. An island, but no less a mountain. Bloody Bald, they called it, though it had a name in Cherokee. bloody bald because the naked rock outcrops on its east and west flanks caught the first red rays of dawn and the last red rays of dusk. Suddenly, the half-heard, half-felt buzz was back, like some insect humming in front of David's face, and his eyes misted again, worse than ever, tingling badly. He rubbed them with his fingers, squinted, and stared into space, suddenly motionless, for a bloody ball shimmered as David looked at it, seeming at once to fade and to rise higher, like a symmetrical cone, almost as perilously pointed as the steeple of a church, David thought. Misty gray-green trees shrouded the lower slopes, merging into a sort of twisting haze of pastel colors that obscured the place where the shoreline should have been. A little higher up, shadowy gardens now overlaid the naked rocks, weaving in and out of the ghostly filigree of embattled white walls, which in turn gave way to the slender fluted towers that crowned the peak like the clustered facets of some rare crystal. Pale banners flickered from the golden roofs of those tenuous pinnacles, and faint but clear came the distant sound of trumpets blowing. It was like a watercolor painting seen through the screen of fog, like a thing seen in a dream, shaped by the mind alone, or by the spirit. That's part of Chapter 1 from Windmaster's Bane by Tom Deitz, now available as print on demand or an ebook from www.untreedreads.com. This is Brad Strickland for Tom Deitz and Windmaster's Bane. Thank you very much.